Governor Quinn outlines his most difficult budget, but a pension deal is still elusive. We'll talk about it next on Capitol View. Welcome to Capitol View, the program where we talk about state government, sometimes the federal government, and how it just might affect your life. I'm Bernie Schoenburg from the State Journal-Register. With me, a couple of Springfield news hounds today, if I may use that term. Alex Degman is here, anchor and reporter for WTAX AM. How do you like to say the station?
News Radio WTAX.
News Radio WTAX.
WTAX is fine, Bernie. Thanks for bringing me back.
Alex, keeping some of those early morning hours, especially on Saturday, right?
Yes, yes indeed.
Welcome. And Patrick Yeagle is back. He is a reporter with the Illinois Times, the news weekly in Springfield.
Thanks for having me.
Welcome. Governor Quinn, it's not unusual in recent years. This governor, past governor, I remember even Governor Ryan, when giving a budget address, not to get a lot of applause. Governor Quinn giving his budget address, he got applause when he talked about Clark Netsch, who we might memorialize a bit later. But that, other than a greeting and a goodbye, there was a 25-minute speech and nobody applauded because the news was so bad. So, Alex, where are we on the state budget? We are, obviously talking about a lot of programs that no new programs, and we have basically no money to spend on new things because there's no pension deal.
Right. Well, and the governor spoke a lot about a pension deal that hasn't happened yet. He spent a lot of time giving a pretty firm to-do to lawmakers, like, you guys haven't done this, I will sign a bill right now. And as he said a few times, he's ready to sign a pension bill today, but obviously that can't happen yet. Basically, without getting into too many details, I'm pretty sure Pat would like to go into a few details. The governor outlined a $35.6 billion spending plan. The House, not surprisingly, wants to spend a little bit less than that, $35.1 billion, and the Senate, not surprisingly, wants to spend more than the House. And it's funny because that's how it seems to break down every year, yet people are surprised every year at this. So there's about a half a billion dollar discrepancy in there somewhere, and a lot of it may come from the fact that the governor, despite not enacting any new programs, he does want to increase spending in some areas. For example, veteran services. He wants to increase spending on mental health care.
Early childhood education.
And early childhood education, and but education overall is taking a fairly significant hit, about a 3% cut.
Yeah,
that's right.
Is it $400 million
or
something?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So he wants to put more money into some things but cut out of other things. So, and now we play this game, reconciling the House budget, the Senate budget, and neither of them are probably going to look like what the governor wants. But the governor has set the tone, and it's going to be hard. It's going to be a difficult thing to do.
I heard some legislators, I know Bill Brady, who ran against Pat Quinn last time, who is the state senator, Republican from Bloomington, said budget is dead on arrival, because it hurts education, doesn't do other things. Patrick, your thoughts or observances?
It's actually kind of funny that he should say that, because didn't he run on a platform of 10% cuts across the board?
He did.
And he did until he didn't, as I recall. But yes, that
ironically, that
time. Yeah.
Seems like what we're getting with Pat Quinn. Even though we as voters apparently rejected that notion before, and now we're back to where we are. A couple of things are important to note about Pat Quinn's budget plan for 2014. It includes no new deferrals, meaning we're hopefully not going to be pushing any more bills off, any more new bills off for the future. So that's one thing to, I guess, highlight as a positive.
Right, because we still have like $9 billion in unpaid bills,
exactly.
Vendors are waiting for, sometimes for months or a year.
Exactly, and actually, we were looking through the budget summary here a little earlier, and it looks like they're projecting to get down to $6.8 billion by the end of 2014. So those are two positives. How realistic those are going to be is still up in the air.
Right, and you've got some legislators saying we should, end what's called what 40. What was the percentage? 67% tax increase of a couple of years ago, from 3% to 5% individual taxes enacted at the end of 2011, supposed to go off the books or start being reduced in 2015. Some say, get rid of it now, but that's like a $6 or $7 billion hole in the budget, so it's a difficult thing to talk about in the middle of all of this other stuff. Right. So, I'm not exactly sure.
Well, yeah, I guess the idea there is if we're going to repeal the tax increase, I mean, people have been talking about repealing the tax increase since it was enacted. I think there was a bill filed the next day, if I'm not mistaken. The idea is possibly making the state more business friendly to incentivize companies to move here, but that is kind of a very down the road approach. I mean, that's not going to take care of the $6 billion hole immediately. But what's interesting, and we're looking at this budget summary, I was kind of surprised to find out that we're supposed to have the $6.8 billion backlog. That's the level it's supposed to be at by the end of the next fiscal year. I'm not sure that the governor's proposal that was outlined yesterday was, I guess you could call it a proposal to pay down the backlog, to close some corporate loopholes, suspend them for, I think it was 12 weeks at a time or something like that. Maybe a few $100 million here or there, but I was kind of hoping to see more, because if you were at the budget briefing the night before, Governor Quinn's spokeswoman said, well, the governor's going to outline an idea to pay this down, but is that enough? Probably not, but we got to start somewhere, I suppose.
I guess every little bit helps. Obviously, what the governor said, he did not mention Squeezy the pension python, which has been made fun of some.
Not by name.
The cartoon character that the governor, put out a video earlier this year to try to show legislators this snake around the Capitol dome, and he's, the pension squeeze, it costs so much money that it's squeezing out the money from all other programs, which is why, for example, there will be less for education next year. But he talked about pensions a lot, and he basically said, lawmakers, it's up to you. And what I heard from some legislators is, well, you've been the governor now 5 years, where's the leadership? So what are we viewing as far as potential progress anytime soon on a pension plan? Will we get one this spring session that we're now in the middle of, or what's it looking like?
Well, I got a chance to talk to Democrat Elaine Nekritz from Northbrook very briefly after the speech yesterday, and she was, I'm trying to think of the right word to use, she was pleased to hear some of the things that the governor wanted to see in a pension plan, because apparently they are very similar to what she and then State Representative Daniel Biss presented.
Now State Senator.
Yeah, now State Senator Daniel Biss, and they're working on that. But the governor wants to do a number of things to help pay this down. Number one, suspending the cost of living adjustments, the 3% cost of living adjustments for certain income levels until this is taken care of. The governor's spokeswoman said that that's not exactly what he meant, but that's what a lot of people took away from it. So suspending COLAs in some way, making current employees pay more, I think is something that more state representatives and senators on both sides realize has to happen. But the problem that a lot of people will tell you that you're going to run into is, does that count as a diminution of benefits under the Constitution? Because apparently there's a very wide there's a very wide interpretation of that.
Yeah, one of the things to put a very fine edge on it is when if you start working for the state, you get a promise of future benefits versus the benefits that you already have vested. There's a difference, I would think, between the two sides of the debate. If I start working for the government and I'm promised that someday I will get this amount of benefits. To me, that seems like a promise, but to the other side who wants to cut the benefits, that they're saying, well, you haven't got those benefits yet, so we're not degrading those benefits if we don't cut something that you haven't already gotten.
Okay.
So
I can see that would be a lawyer's dream in a lawsuit,
so,
and the Supreme Court of the state of Illinois ultimately is probably going to act on whatever the legislature passes, because if you're going to lower pensions even for future employees, somebody's going to file a lawsuit and there has to be a decision made. And so part of the argument that the governor and others have made is, let's get something done so that it can at least get before the court, so that the solution money can start to roll in or be realized at some point.
Well, you hit the nail on the head there. The problem, as I see it, is people are afraid that it's not going to pass constitutional muster, but we've been talking about that for years now. So, I mean, come on, let's just put something out there and put it to a vote.
Well,
it's easy for me to say that because I'm not in their position. But
well, what's interesting is when Elaine Nekritz, who you mentioned, one of the leaders on the pension negotiations, and several other legislators, including Tom Cross, the leader of House Republicans, gave a press conference with their latest plan. One of the things she said was that she thinks the court would view the fiscal situation of Illinois as an emergency, and you can do things in an emergency that the Constitution may not allow at other times. Now, usually when you think of an emergency, it's like a natural disaster.
Are we suspending habeas corpus?
I'm not sure I found that an interesting argument, and I don't know if either of you have an opinion of that argument, but for the court to find that Illinois' fiscal situation, which has been dug into for 40 years of underfunding pensions, to be viewed as such an emergency that you could kind of look in a different light at the constitutional requirement not to lower pension benefits that people have received. I don't know, just an interesting argument.
The whole idea of an emergency to me, that I was aware of this idea a couple of weeks ago when it came out, but the fact that this has been accruing as a problem for many years, and lawmakers for generations have had, well, maybe not generations, but decades anyway, have had an opportunity to fix this so it didn't get to this point. At what point does it become an emergency? What's the line in the sand here? So
it's almost a manufactured emergency. We've known this
slowly manufactured.
Exactly,
okay.
Exactly.
Well, we will see where it goes, because that will be a continuing theme of this show and anybody talking about state government this year. Rallies don't always make news, but it looked to me like thousands of people in Springfield. I know the organizers said many thousands, but there was a long line of people that marched from the convention center downtown Springfield to the Lincoln statue outside the Dome with yellow signs talking about don't take away our gun rights, because as we know, the federal court in Chicago has ordered Illinois to come up with some plan to allow legal carry of weapons, concealed or not, I think, in Illinois, which is the last state that doesn't allow some form of legal carry. A lot of legislators from the Chicago area mostly from the Chicago area, have tried to use the amendment process to put a lot of potential restrictions on where you could carry a gun. You can't carry it in a theater, you can't carry it in a school, some obvious things and some less obvious. A patchwork of rules that could make carry unrealistic at all in Illinois. On the other hand, a lot of the gun rights advocates who were here in Springfield this last week want pretty much, don't mess with the Second Amendment. Let responsible citizens protect themselves as they see fit. Where's this one going to go? Any late news on that or thoughts?
The iGold rally, I think it held a lot more significance this year than it usually does, because there will be a concealed carry bill that passes this year, and I think a lot of the iGold marchers and the gun rights supporters knew that, and they showed it. They were very I thought that it was one of the most respectful groups of people that I'd ever come across yesterday at the Capitol. They were very well organized. They were very respectful of everybody. So I'm really pleased that.
What does everybody else like dance about or what? No.
Well, I've covered quite a few rallies at the State House. Some are a lot more organized than others. Let's just put it that way.
Okay. Well, I mean, there's a lot of passion in this group, is there not?
Oh, sure. There's passion in any groups, but it's just a matter of conveying that message in an appropriate format, and they certainly did that. So in terms of the patchwork that you mentioned, you're right. A lot of the amendments, I think the House debated for, what was it, about 6 hours last week?
One full day that Speaker Madigan set aside.
And that's where we're starting to run into a lot of problems. At what point does the amendment process become so ridiculous that it's just easier to not do anything at all? So that's where we're at right now. I don't know where this is going to go. All I can say for sure is that we are going to have something because the court has required it. So it'll be interesting to see.
And a couple of things to note: when you were mentioning before, restrictions making concealed carry unrealistic, they don't necessarily even have to make restrictions that will make it unrealistic. Say I go to the theater and I can't carry a pistol in there, so I have to leave it in my car, or leave it at home if I don't want to trust it in my car. They don't necessarily even have to go that route. They can make what's known as there's a difference between what are called shall issue states and may issue states, meaning that the shall issue states are ones in which the issuing authority must give the license if the applicant meets a certain specific set of requirements. And in may issue states, such as New York or Rhode Island, the final discretion lays usually with local authorities like a sheriff, and he has the authority to say, well, I know that you're a troublemaker, so
I don't want you to have a gun.
Exactly. And so even if you do meet all the requirements, you still may not get a thing. And that's one of the routes that has been one of the actually at least one of the amendments to the bill
to make it a may issue.
Right, exactly.
Okay, and of course I'm sure the marchers this week would want a shall issue. But the court apparently gives discretion to Illinois. So
correct.
because Illinois has been really, obviously you could look at it as Chicago dominated, but a gun control state all these years, being the last of the 50 without a concealed carry law of any sort. So yeah, well, it'll be interesting to see what comes out of this.
Related to concealed carry, though, there, I believe it was May 5th, a couple of days ago, that the House debated for probably about an hour or so on an assault weapons ban, meaning basically semi-automatic rifles that look like military-style rifles. They don't shoot fully automatically, but they do look like their military cousins.
And they would
exactly.
You could pull the trigger a lot of times quickly.
Exactly, and I'm sure that the gun folks are seeing that as a basically they hold all of the cards in the concealed carry arena, but they know that they don't hold all the cards on the larger issue of guns, because they could still see a lot of the guns that they want to carry, restricted.
Right. Of course,
so
it's hard to conceal.
Well, that's true. That's true.
Yeah. And Governor Quinn clearly wants restrictions on assault weapons. And of course, federal legislation is being discussed as we speak. In fact, Senator Durbin and Senator Kirk, the Democrat and Republican representing Illinois in the Senate, are both like co-sponsors of a bill that would disallow straw purchases. I think, if you buy guns and then give them to somebody else, which is the way a lot of them get into the wrong hands. So we'll see, it's kind of like healthcare. The state does a lot, but there's these federal regulations that are coming down the road too,
right.
Especially after Sandy Hook. So we will see where this goes. Governor Quinn, a year ago when a gaming bill was passed, the people who have the casinos call it gaming and the people who don't like them call it gambling, but 5 new casinos and slots at racetracks, and he said at the time he thought that there weren't enough safeguards against bad people. In fact, in his budget address this week, he talked about some reasonable bill is okay as long as we don't have the, what did he say?
Loopholes for mobsters.
Loopholes for mobsters. That got a laugh on the floor.
Yeah, that was the only reaction he elicited the entire speech.
But he is open now to, he still doesn't want slot machines at the state fair, even though they have horse racing there. He doesn't think it's family oriented for that. But he apparently is open to slots at other racetracks. He's open to perhaps 5 new casinos, including one in Chicago. So any idea where this will go?
This is, as far as I'm concerned, this is pretty much, this is the most agreeable that I've seen the governor be toward a potential gaming bill, because as far as I remember, and I could be a little off on this, but he had been against slots at racetracks in the past. I mean, he's always been against it at the state fair.
Right.
But now that he's in favor of slots at tracks per se, I mean, as long as you have enough safeguards in there to make sure that, political donations are out of the question.
Yeah,
the
that's one of the things he
so-called
wants.
Loopholes for mobsters and things like that. I still think that's pretty funny that he said that, and he said it so forcefully. But
the populist Pat Quinn of 30 years ago is still around.
Oh, of course, yeah. But it's pretty encouraging. I would say it would be encouraging for gaming proponents that the governor's taking a step toward their direction at this point. So I'm not going to go out on a limb and say that gambling expansion is going to pass this session, but the state's definitely getting closer to it.
Yeah, and the money is easy. On the other hand, the other thing that's interesting is some of the traditional opponents of gaming expansion are those who already have riverboat casinos because they don't want the competition. And they've talked, I think their association has talked about, we're getting to a point now that we allow gambling machines, video poker in bars and veterans organization halls and other kinds of establishments all across the state. We're reaching a saturation point of how much people can gamble. So it is, again, Illinois has slowly walked through this door, because I remember when they just started scratch-off lottery tickets, I think Dan Walker allowed that.
Scandalous.
And people kept talking about the moral, dangers of gambling, and as the budget has gotten worse and worse, the arguments have been drowned out by the money coming in, and you just hope that too many lives are not ruined by people gambling when they can't afford to. On to the next. Speaking of medical marijuana. As long as we're talking about gambling, and did we talk about booze? Let's talk about marijuana.
Society.
But Lou Lang, a state representative from Skokie, for years has been trying to get medical marijuana legalized in Illinois. Are we getting closer to that?
We talked. You mentioned before that it passed the committee. Honestly, I'm not impressed. I mean, it's passed committee before, right? I'll be impressed when it survives a floor vote in either chamber. I mean, honestly, I think it's inevitable that we will have medical marijuana or some sort of decriminalization at the state level at some point. Maybe it'll be 20 years down the road when the feds finally wake up and say this drug war is not all that cost effective or broadly effective. But at some point we're going to have something, and until this bill actually moves forward to a House vote and actually survives a House vote or a floor vote, I'm not surprised.
It is interesting. This is one of those things, one of those issues where I think public opinion has moved some, but it's still a tough vote because if you vote to say marijuana is legal, then depending on older people vote. Older people have heard all their lives that marijuana is bad and it's the gateway drug and all of this, and those flyers are targeted to those people who get out and vote in droves, saying, "Oh, you're being soft on crime," and that's. Again, it's been interesting because Illinois also, if you talk to AFSCME, the largest state government union, a big problem right now is that the governor has been closing prisons while we still have overcrowding in prisons, and they're closing the Dwight Women's Prison, and they're trying to move all of those prisoners to a facility that will be all women. I think it's in Lincoln. So there's just a lot of upheaval in a state with no money, and the drug laws are just a part of it. While I'm sure we have time, I wanted to talk some about Dawn Clark Netsch. Did either of you ever deal with Dawn Clark Netsch? Yeah. Who was, I remember her in the Senate. She was a member of they called it Crazy Eight when she was elected in '72. Vince DiMuzio of Carlinville was another one. These were Democrats who were outside the Daley machine, outside the Chicago Democratic machine, and they were reformers. And she basically stayed a reformer all her career. She became the first woman comptroller of Illinois, elected in '90. In '94, she was the first woman to lead a statewide ticket. She ran for governor against Jim Edgar. It was a very bad year for Democrats. That's when Newt Gingrich, took over the wave of the House. And but Dawn Clark Netsch, she lost badly to Jim Edgar. She also, at that time, was opposed personally to the death penalty. Well, we no longer have the death penalty in Illinois, but at that time, she was painted as soft on crime. And she also wanted to raise income taxes to help schools while lowering property taxes. But that, of course, allowed the ads to say she was a tax raiser. So she ended up, even after retiring from politics per se, she was on the commission to reform state government after the Blagojevich fiasco. She was a law professor at Northwestern. And she was just kind of a very interesting, many call her an icon in Illinois politics. So any thoughts are welcome, but I know that she will be missed. A lot of people are very saddened when she had Lou Gehrig's disease, which affects your ability to breathe. And she was 86 years old and passed away this past week.
I only got to talk with her a few times, and every time that I did, she was always genuinely nice, even though, I never met her in person, but she was always, she always greet me, warmly and everything on the phone. I'm not sure if she remembered me or not. I'm not all that memorable, but she was just genuinely nice, and she had so much knowledge, such an in-depth knowledge. The Constitutional Convention, for example, she was a delegate there. Right. Just the breadth of experience that she had was just amazing. Many
have said that she had knowledge that they had not seen before, and she was also on the staff, one of the top 4 staffers, I think, of Governor Kerner. So, and this was all at a time when it was even tough for women to get into law school and then to get a job. So,
yeah, absolutely. The only times that I had dealt with Dawn Clark Netsch was in her capacity on the board of the Illinois Campaign for Political Reform, and like Pat said, just the immense wealth of knowledge that one person can have. When you lose that is just it's terrible. It's a terrible loss for the state. And granted, I was very young when she was going through all of her political trials. When she was running for governor, when John Cullerton was appointed to replace her in the state senate, I barely remember any of that. But just the ideas that she brought to the table and the knowledge that she shared with anybody who ever came in contact with her, it's going to be greatly missed.
Well, I remember her quite well because I was at her announcement in Springfield for governor and actually covered her way back when she was in the Senate too. And she, very erudite in her presentation, always had a scarf. She used to smoke a cigarette in a cigarette holder before it was illegal to smoke indoors. But I agree with both of you. Always very nice to people and a great loss. As this weekend is happening, the Republican Party is getting together to try to determine if Pat Brady, on another subject, the chairman of the Republican Party, should be ousted. Some of the Republicans who want him ousted say it's because the party did so poorly in the last election, but clearly a reason that this has happened in part is that he also came out against something that's in the platform of the state Republican Party. He's for gay marriage and was arguing that members of his party should be for it because it's the wave of the future. Any thoughts about how that's looking or how that's going to come out?
This is one of the few things that we'll talk about on this show that I will actually express an opinion. If they want to talk about Pat Brady in terms of his leadership abilities, because the Republicans should have manhandled everything in 2012, but they didn't. They lost by a lot, and there are now more. The state's now even more under Democrat control than it was before. If you want to look at it from that perspective, that's fine. I understand, but to oust him because he comes out in favor of same-sex marriage, I think, with everything that's going on in the state, the pension debacle, the budget, everything else that we need to be worrying about right now. Really? I don't really even know what else to say to that, because if that's what you're worried about and that's what you want your party to be known for, ousting its leader because he's against gay marriage.
Okay. Well, I will say that Jim Oberweis, who is a new state senator who ran statewide a few times, but did win a state senator. He's from the Aurora area. And he said, you know, it's like the CEO of the party basically coming out in public against a platform of the plank. Even if you disagree with it, don't be that public about it. So, I mean, that's the argument.
Right.
You know, and Oberweis said that, you know, he also got involved in primaries where he shouldn't have. So it's many things, but who knows? Clearly, it's viewed, certainly by the media, as a gay rights thing, a same-sex marriage thing. Patrick?
It's probably more a case of the straw that broke the camel's back. I think there's been a lot of resentment of him, you know, at the lower level of the party for a while. There's a Chicago attorney named Doug Eibendal who's
he really doesn't like him.
Yeah, he keeps very close tabs on this stuff. And reading his critiques, he makes some very good points about direct election of the state Central Committee. Oh, go ahead. If you,
we're going to have to wrap it up.
Okay,
because
that's fine.
Time has run. But I appreciate your thoughts. We'll see how that comes out this weekend. Alex Degman, Patrick Yeagle, thanks for your help. I'm Bernie Schoenburg, and thank you for watching. We'll see you next time on Capitol View.